Welcome to Modern Anarchy, the podcast exploring sex, relationships, and liberation. I'm your host, Nicole.
I tried to keep her quiet, but she's screaming inside of me. I tried to keep her hiding, oh, shut up. I tried to keep her quiet, but she's a wild, wild woman.
On today's episode, we have Dr. Broderick Sawyer. Join us for a conversation all about applied liberation psychology. Together, we talk about integrating the woowoo into clinical psychology, tuning into plant logic, and the compassion avatar technique. Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to Modern Anarchy. I am so delighted to have all of you pleasure activists from around the world tuning in for another episode each Wednesday. My name is Nicole. I am a sex and relationship psychotherapist with training in psychedelic integration therapy. And I'm also the founder of the Pleasure Practice, supporting individuals in crafting expansive sex lives and intimate relationships. Dear listener, what a special episode I have for you today. What a special, special episode. Dr. Broderick Sawyer's voice, it is so calm, it is so lovely. This is just like prime podcast content, and I am so, so excited to share it with you. And gosh, dear listener, we talk a lot about the power of presence and the power of embodied presence. And I know there are so many therapists and healers and social activists who listen to this podcast. I want to say hi, hello. Thank you for the important work that you are doing in the world. And one of the most important things that we can do is be in our bodies. Dear listener, please take a deep breath with me. I'm going to take a deep breath in through the nose and exhale it out. Gosh, there's so much to do in our bodies, so much to do in the world, so much to do with the practice of being present. And you know, Dr. Broderick and I talked about the ways in which, as healers, you know, it's not always about the words that you say, right? It's more about the presence that you can create for that person. And it got me thinking to, sure, my therapy work, but also the work that I do in this podcast space, right? Especially in these unscripted intros that I do for you, dear listener. And I just hope that in these intros and the conversations that you can feel my presence, which is full of passion and optimism and just pure raw fire to study the erotic and to study the liberation of our pleasure and to study relationships. And I hope you can feel that presence each week. I hope you can feel the safe space that I am creating for you, for my guests, for myself, to explore some of life's most complex and nuanced topics. And I am truly, truly, truly just so grateful that you're here, dear listener, and that I get to share this creative work with you. All right, dear listener. If you are ready to liberate your pleasure, you can explore my offerings and resources at modernanarchypodcast.com, linked in the show notes below. And I want to say the biggest thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. You are supporting the long-term sustainability of the podcast, keeping this content free and accessible to all people. So thank you. If you want to join the Patreon community, get exclusive access into my research and personal exploration, then you can head on over to patreon.com/modernanarchypodcast. And with that, dear listener, please know that I am sending you all my love, Anne. Let's tune in to today's episode. So, then the first question I like to ask each guest is, how would you introduce yourself to the listeners?
Hmm. Hmm. Who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's the absolute and then there's the relative. On the absolute level, I'm you, I'm nature. On the relative level, clinical roles,
Mm-hmm.
which I like to just be one at a time. So
Sure.
sometimes I'm a clinical psychologist training in mindfulness, compassion, the CBT, psychodynamic, neuroscience, attachment, energy psychology. Once I realized that CBT was, in essence, just saying that it was the best and trying to poo-poo everything else after only existing for about 30 years, which is just what I
Right.
call colonizer arrogance, Western arrogance.
Right.
Then I started to dip around and say, all right, well, what else is out there? And then that eventually led me to my Buddhist teacher. So I've been an 8-year Buddhist practitioner, former college athlete, about 6'4". You can't see it in the video, or through your ears, or maybe you can. From the New York City area, but really brodericksawyer.com is the place to go to see all those varied
Sure.
professional roles. Dr. Broad 123 on Instagram. And as far as activities, I speak, I train mental health professionals primarily to be in their bodies.
Yeah.
Uh,
Huge.
consultation, do a lot of teaching of meditation. That's where my energy psychology will come through. Do some a little bit of psychotherapy, small caseload. I really love the folks on the one end who I'm working with who are just asking those who and why sorts of questions. And then on the other hand, I do just a couple of groups for partial hospitalization with eating disorders, and I teach them energy psychology. It's the number one psychological disorder that can cause death. And for me, that's a time where really punching the gas, so to speak, it's warranted. They want it, they're asking for it. So it's a space where I can really use a lot of this, existential energy, psychology knowledge just to really punch it for folks who are needing it badly. And then I write conceptual papers to pour my philosophies, nature's philosophies into really everything. And that's really the beauty of the really only thing that I teach, which is applied liberation psychology, or what I call compassion-based performance psychology. And in essence, it's plant logic. It's tuning into Mother Nature's instincts, which is the one energy realization. You look at anything, anywhere is just one energy body. You hold something in your hand, you're relating to energy, right? That's just
Mm-hmm.
one block of energy, and we're all just swimming in that, and energy can't be destroyed.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's just recycling and changing form through understanding our thoughts and our concepts and honoring our concepts and coming in and tuning into our energy. This realization is very natural, and it's
Mm-hmm.
blocked by dissociation, which society causes. It's blocked by taking thoughts to be a stand-in for reality, which is a Western problem, a
Mm.
Western misunderstanding of reality. So I just use my words to guide people into that realization, or to get them sort of on the path
Yeah.
to self-realization, because enlightenment isn't a binary sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely not.
Mm.
And I teach it's really two things: energy literacy and compassion and magnetism.
Mm.
Because human beings, it's a hardware problem. It's not a software problem. It's a
Mm.
hardware problem. So it's the age of information. So we think more information will give us, and even if it's the best information, even if it's super actually correct, if there's no practice
Sure.
of it, then it doesn't really matter. So I try to help people tune into energy, what energy
Mm-hmm.
nourishes me, what energy depletes me, and then folks become more present. Their amygdala, or their fear part of their brain, starts to shrink a little bit, so those emotions aren't overwhelming. our sense of reality, aka projection,
Hmm.
and then through compassionate magnetism, and we can do I guess a brief exercise if there's time
Sure.
to really hack the insula, because that's just a matter that if we can press that button, the ego, so to speak, the mind can be overwhelmed by
Mm.
compassion. But I think that's something which is a little trickier, but is really all I really teach. So sort of an
Yeah.
inner relationship anarchy.
Ah.
When you have overwhelming self-love, you tune into Mother Nature's instincts. And there aren't many things that are never wrong, but Mother Nature is actually never wrong. So tuning into that in that inner voice, that's really there's only one inner voice. And in that way, that's just the greatest thing I can really offer
Hmm.
humanity. And that's just kind of what I've decided. And at a certain point, I recognize that belief is extremely primitive. I didn't want belief. I wanted conviction. Want a conviction within myself, and that took a lot of iterating, so to speak. And I'm still iterating different teachers or teachings or styles or
Hmm.
playing with a meditation album. I released one for accessibility's sake, trying to do another compassion based one
Cool.
without triggering people too much. But we'll see. But that's pretty much me. And then you'll hear me talk a lot about practice. You see the
Sure.
athlete in me because hardware doesn't like change itself just by gaining more information. That's just software. The hardware is the really the main point.
Mm. What a joy to have you on the podcast today. I'm really
Mm,
excited to talk about all of that. I, again, already feel the limitedness of our hour and a half wherever we'll go, right? Um,
mhm.
some of the things you were saying, I definitely work from a feminist, relational, systemic, existential narrative,
Mm,
somatic sort of framework. And particularly when I think about relationships, the feminist psychologist would say, like good relationships give you five good things. And one of them being zest for life. And so that's
mm,
something when you were just talking about following the energy and that space and that, again, zest, that liveliness, it's something that I've been trying to do in my life of just noticing which relationships give me that
mm,
feeling. And
mm,
of course, balancing that with the energy high that is a new relationship and the cocaine
mhm.
phase of that like love drug. Whoa, whoa, whoa. So I have to be able to like balance the like, ooh, you make me feel so good, but like, wow, maybe that's just the beginning, right? So,
Mm,
but a
mm,
lot of that energy has been what I've been following in terms of how I've gotten to this space of, where is it resonating in my body? And I'm just thinking about, you know, clinical psychology and everything that you just said feel like juxtapositions in some ways. I've been going through this training and everything is, yeah, evidence-based practice, CBT,
mm,
all this sort of stuff. And so it's really
mm,
nice to have you in this space as someone who's maybe gone through the same hazing that I've gone through
mhm,
to
mhm,
understand this world of,
mm,
energy being too woo-woo to talk about. But I think
mm.
that it's so deeply related to our bodies and we all feel it in our bodies.
Yeah, yeah. We're not dummies. And the
Yeah.
thing that I realized is the people that I serve and work with, they're certainly not dummies either.
Yeah.
And so I remember this is very interesting. This is where I sort of realized the juxtaposition. I was working with this patient, I believe it was on my postdoc.
Hmm.
And I was still very much like evidence-based, blah, 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 you know. I had my woo-woo stuff, right? But I saw it as woo-woo and unrelated.
Right.
Oh, so that integration really hadn't started. So I'm sitting with this person and I'm telling her all about what it is, what the
Mm.
problem is, and da, da, da. So there's a blend of Western narcissism in here. There's a blend of mansplaining in here. There's a blend of all of the things, all of
Mhm.
the stuff. Me just doing. And she goes, and this is an actual quote. She goes, "I don't give a fuck what you call it. Help me." Mm. And that's really when my heart began to come into the space, into the work. And that's when I started to see the words as separate from presence. And
Mm.
that's what, in training a lot of mental health professionals, this is exactly what I teach them is that we're trying to find the right words to communicate compassion rather than embodying the magnetism, the energy, the real
Hmm.
energy that communicates that. And you can feel that. That's just what
Yeah.
vibes are. And
Right.
when you can actually be in your body, it's almost like this old building that you're just turning on the air conditioner or the vents, and then all these cobwebs start to come out.
Mm.
We were talking a little bit about coming back into the body, circulating prana, circulating chi, energy.
Hmm.
Once you start to do that, then this quote unquote system gives itself sort of an oil change. And then that energy begins to sort of radiate outward. The aura grows. And the only folks who can't feel this or call it woo-woo are just energy illiterate, I call it. And
Hmm.
that's because of pain. And you have to metabolize pain. And
Sure.
that refusal is to metabolize pain is friction, and that is suffering.
Mm.
That is suffering, is that resistance. And it's a very fascinating process and thing, but it's just been so consistent
Sure.
for me, seeing human beings, sitting with myself, being with myself, being with you just once you get out of the words, you see it and it's very, very obvious. Then it's just contorting the words to be
Sure.
the person who's using these words or using,
Right.
whatever it may be. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe even to ground it a little bit for, myself and anyone else who's afraid of the woo is
Mhm.
it's just interesting because when you connect with someone, right, we know mirror neurons. We know that my body is picking up what you're putting down across from me. And then we also know that my voice, right, it is a vibration at the end of the day,
Mhm.
quite
Mhm.
literally in physics,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so my breath controls my voice. And so if I'm really tight up here and I'm, like you're going to feel that
Hmm.
and then feel it in your body and be moved by that, right? And
Hmm.
and so I think for me, the more that I've stepped into my embodiment, the more that I can feel that from different people of, whoa, okay, you are holding your
Yes.
breath. And I can quite literally feel that. And so then being able to feel into their embodiment
Hmm.
just based on how fast or, how breathy they are.
That's beautiful. And that's it. Once you can recognize your own humanity, and if you're really allowing that to happen, you're allowing that energy of safety, of love to manifest inside of yourself, just really relaxing into your body with
Hmm.
whatever that is. And sometimes this for us is relaxing into the experience of sadness or the experience of fear. Ooh,
Sure.
fear. First time I settled into fear with no filter, no sedatives, no nothing, I was like, woo, it's electric,
Hey,
it's
hey, I'm a rock climber, so
yeah.
yeah.
But
Uh,
that's love.
yeah.
These energies are natural. And when we start to allow those energies to really pull us to act or not, then we can see when folks are resisting their own what's inside of them, which is
Hmm.
very, very interesting. And to as mental health professionals, to feel a therapist, vibrating like that, or for them to pick up on the fear of a patient and not try to counter that by relaxing themselves.
Right. I
You know,
know.
I'm afraid, so I'm gonna give you advice or challenge your thoughts, or let's do a breathing exercise to get rid of that fear that's actually helping you because that's a realistic fear that you have there.
Totally.
Yeah.
That was literally me yesterday. Like just feeling so much of it and being like, okay, my job is to take the deep breath and then, and then invite them to do it with me, and like just let
Yes.
go of the cognitive. But I'm already just thinking about, like say we were teaching or educating this, which you do, but I'm trying to imagine it. Like it'd be so hard, I remember in my group therapy class, just
Mhm.
we were doing some sort of processing group as the class, which was
Mhm.
fascinating to do a processing
Interesting.
group with your, with your
Oh yeah.
with your colleagues.
Yeah.
But anyhow, one of them had disclosed that their therapist had said, "Well, where do you feel this in the body?" And she was like, "I
Hmm.
don't know what she means when she says that. I feel nothing in this body. What are you talking about?" And I think that I, in my past life, like way back, years ago, would have said the same thing of I don't know what you mean feel in the body. And so just thinking
Mm.
about even trying to teach this to some clinicians, like you'd be starting there at What do you
Yes.
mean in my body? And that breaks my heart just knowing how much of this is an embodied experience. And when I'm sitting in a neuropsychology class, we'll be talking about, oh, cortisol, cortisol, cortisol. What do you think cortisol does to the body? My God, we don't talk about anything of what to do with what it does to the body. Like we
That's
know it's
right.
there, but
That's
like
right.
CBT, you know, and you're just
Yeah,
like,
yeah, 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 yeah. More software.
she's like, oh no.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's sad.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so top heavy. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel, well, this is me being very dark. My convictions are very dark. It's not
Sure.
cynical if it's true.
Yeah.
Uh, but when it comes to human beings, at least, I find, and a part of the reason why I went back into psychotherapy after doing a lot of speaking
Hmm.
in 2020, I call it the I'm Not Racist tour, speaking tour 2020 to 2022. People don't really change
Mm.
unless they are desperate to do so.
Sure.
And our field is so young, so unbelievably young. And when you're doing the same thing that the first person thought of, right? And obviously Freud has had his issues and conditionings, right?
Right.
But he said, we should, this is a random idea. Let's do it one-on-one. And we're still doing that in the exact same way. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just a sign of the youth. We're still doing this. Like, yo, like this is this is going to take some time to really
Yeah.
refine and understand, and also see that there is a huge interaction effect. And at least the folks who I like to work with, whether it's different patients who are desperate to change or helpers who are desperate to help, those are the ones that I can actually reason with and talk to. Say, hey, if you want to be a great therapist, if you want to serve everyone, because you're not in this field, just to have a good time, obviously,
Right.
then practicing and working with yourself to become embodied will actually, in my opinion, in my conviction, allow us to dominate the neuro of the space. Because if I'm relaxed,
Right.
no matter what, there my patient is going to pick up on that. People
Yep.
around me are going to pick up on that, and that
Yep.
has so well. I mean, mirror neurons are woo woo in that way, because that's just the strength and the clarity and the naturalness of the aura. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And how are you supposed to do trauma
Mhm.
work if you're not there? And again,
Yeah.
even a class on trauma is not required by the APA for clinical psychology, which is mind-boggling.
Weird.
I know, right? But like, how are you supposed to do trauma work when
Mhm.
you're not embodied? I just don't really
Yeah.
understand how you could be sitting across from someone and not noticing, oh, wow, okay, I'm getting activated. I'm getting triggered. What do I do with
Mhm.
myself as they're sharing these deep pieces? Like, I have to
Mhm.
know when my gaze starts to narrow and I'm feeling that like kind of light faintiness. I need to know that. And can we pause, take a moment, right? And without that, I think both people can get hurt in that sort of scenario. But it's just, yeah, not really talked about at all. And I think even one of the biggest things in this for me was getting off of coffee. My God, like my God.
Mhm.
I drank so much coffee and,
Mhm.
was
Mhm.
diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. Holy
Mhm.
shit, that drug was running me
Mhm.
wild.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
I had no idea. And so when I meet with clients, I almost, like, what drugs
Mhm.
are you on? And I'm talking coffee. Like, what drugs?
Yeah.
Not just your SSRIs, not just the illegal quote, like, are you on
Yeah.
coffee? Because that drug
Yeah.
is gonna produce
For
that,
real.
real experience in the body.
Huh.
It's wild to me.
Yeah. What energy are you consuming and what is it
Yeah,
doing to you?
right.
In an all-pervasive kind of sense. When we define what is quote unquote bad for you, like what's the quote? It is no measure of health to be
Right.
well adjusted to a profoundly sick society.
Yeah, totally.
And that is really that's the essence of the misunderstanding and really the narcissism of the West in particular, and to call things pseudoscience without a full a full investigation into whatever it is that's being said, because we're only limited by the questions we can ask
Mm-hmm.
and the experiences of the question askers.
Right.
So, black man less than 2% of psychologists. So
Right.
you're telling me that less than 2% of psychologists are asking questions and investigating research. And if I came right out and just didn't code switch at any point in my writing or my interviews or
Yeah.
wherever, I wouldn't even get my degree. So it's this self-fulfilling prophecy and this whole I think it was Chris Rock who said, if it's all white, it's all right,
Mm,
and that's real. You can't get by unless you assimilate and present that assimilation to the mass culture. And, if you are going to be a black man and be accepted, then you better be an athlete or a rapper.
yeah.
You're going to fit in, with
Right.
the names that we give you, and or a comedian or something that really fits
Hmm.
in that way. And
Right.
it's very interesting. And I'm sure there are experiences for women in the queer community as well, where if you embody something, it scares the shit out of the status quo. And then they sort of launch to lock you in a straitjacket. For myself, that has a lot to do with base and power and conviction. See, a black man like speaking with conviction, it scares the shit out of everybody.
Sure. Yeah.
And also being 6'4" too, you sort of learn
Right.
these different strategies of
Totally.
how to control the transference, so to
Right.
speak. If I smile and I laugh and I'm funny, then people leave me alone, right? And they, oh, ha ha ha. But in that way, right, getting back to like the who am I, right? Am I the actor? Am I underneath that? Who am I really when I'm completely almost like a tree? Trees are just nature's just exploding everywhere with its own energies, which is
Mhm.
how growth happens. And I think the growth of psychology, we're talking self-realization, enlightenment, it's just a peak experience of what one exactly is, and then navigating
Mhm.
that with the structures that are forcing us to really squeeze. So I think that
Yeah.
takes a lot. And for clinicians,
Yeah.
right, being in our bodies means sort of allowing that energy to move almost without speaking. And
Mm.
that's where I think sometimes the language isn't really that important. Oh, I'm saying some shit today as far as presence.
Sure.
And when we can learn as clinicians to communicate that presence without saying anything, then the words become like tools depending on who we're really speaking to. And that's at
Mm.
least how I've navigated my own need to really pour these non-Western things
Sure.
into psychology by knowing the language and then altering the language. Because if it's true, it's true. I don't need to. I think it was Morpheus who said, someone was like, well, you can't, like, people aren't going to believe you. And he's like, well, what I have to say does not necessitate them to believe it.
Mm.
Nature is
Mm.
nature. If I can just find the right language
Sure.
to lead people to it, in that way, is who doesn't want to feel love? Who doesn't want to feel
Yeah,
peace and
for
relaxation?
sure.
So.
Yeah. I was just in an internship interview for my internship year, the final year of the training, and they asked us for our favorite
Yeah.
movie, and I was like, The Matrix. It's cliche, but like,
That's very cliche.
well, yeah, because of the psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. So I was like, but it's so
Yeah.
true. I just want to take a moment just to hold space for like you getting out of that system. Like, cheers to that,
Um,
Jesus. Like, to get
yeah.
out to where you're at now and to be able, like to have played the
Yeah.
game and then gotten out is really powerful.
Yeah. And then to go back in. And I think
Oof.
this is where the Buddhist practice of non-attachment,
Mm.
of allowing the ego to react, and what I call being in my martyr phase,
I
allowing the
feel that.
ego to react, right, and buck, so to speak, but to help it understand that, hey, this white guy at this conference who gave you a look, or did something microaggressive, or hey, these people not understanding you, right, or whatever it is, right, that doesn't mean that you are unlovable or
Mm.
stupid or off your purpose or whatever it really is. So that truth that I have come to just glimpse enough to
Hmm.
hold on to consistently at all times, that all nature is just one energy thing, it overwhelms anything that the ego has to say
Yeah.
about feeling worthless or whatever it is. And there's
Mm.
two particular points that I fixate on to
Hmm.
really hold on to this, which is non-distinction of energy, one energy body, and non-clinging.
Mm.
Non-clinging. It allows me to feel fear. It allows me to feel sadness and understand that no piece of energy is stronger than awareness, than consciousness itself. And
Mm.
that actually, in such a beautiful way, allows me to hold these things to be true and then use language and not get caught up in my ego about it. And
Sure.
that led to the recent paper that I wrote, which oh man, and two years ago, I would have never wrote that shit.
Ah,
I despise it. I was all
the
caught up.
journey.
Oh, the journey, yeah. I called it liberated cognitive behavioral therapy,
Mm.
liberating CBT from
Juicy.
the cognitive distortions of white Western European culture. And I wrote it in such a way because it's very interesting. When we name a problem to be the main symptom that we see. My father was a firefighter. He was in fire marshal. He was always talking about ignition source, ignition source. When we always
Sure.
look at the thing that is not the source, then we're going to never put out the fire. So in this
Right.
paper, what I tried to do, and being really, frankly, buck with the reviewers, is stray away from this notion of white supremacy. Right? I'm saying bad things right now. These are bad words. And I
Good words
tried
here.
to, it's an anarchy, it's an anarchy.
Yeah.
And to identify that, hey, this idea that our thoughts are correct and our style of living is correct, right, is a sign that we are excited about the way that we live and we really love this. It only becomes a problem when you don't see the value in other people's lifestyles, aka, minding your own business, right?
Hmm.
So this is where the narcissism, which is really, this is narcissism, it's coercing folks to live your way, and if they don't, then they're wrong or distorted or
Right.
sick.
Right.
That's a cultural style, which isn't even exactly white supremacist because people of color can act out this too.
Sure.
Anyone can act this way, and it's a Western cultural style of thinking. And I think that style, rather than this is bad, it makes it very a lot easier to just say, oh, this is just like where I was born, my cultural influence. This doesn't make me a
Hmm.
racist, or this doesn't make me something that brings up shame, which, I don't know if you've ever taught someone something based on shame, but it only goes so far.
Right.
It got me really, it allows me this style, at least, and we'll see if it changes, to teach and engage while still acknowledging people's humanity,
Hmm.
no matter how, opposed I am to certain identities that they bring into this space, super conservative, uh,
Right.
white guy or something like that who hates my guts, and just sometimes just
Yeah.
the who's the like avatar of the person like you've really been
Sure.
conditioned to like resist.
Right.
Can you relate to that person's humanity? And this is the ultimate test of ego for me in my own practice, because nothing changes. If I can't write these things and put these things in the water in forms of
Sure.
landmark papers to really start to, you know, guide us in a way that helps us tie together
Hmm.
the East and the West, the,
Yeah.
man-made and the natural, then
Right.
we're all lost.
Right.
And I think that's starting to happen. I think, especially within the acceptance of psychedelic assisted therapy, I think that's a sign right there
Sure.
that we're,
Oh,
you know,
totally.
Ram Dass got kicked out of Harvard, for this shit. And now, we're in a place
Right.
where like Harvard's like, oh, we're the okay, it's all right.
Right.
So
Right.
it's okay,
Right.
we're getting there.
Exactly. Exactly. Slowly but surely, not fast enough, right?
That's right. Nature's pretty
Yeah.
slow.
Yeah,
Nature's
that's true.
slow.
That's true. That's true.
Mhm.
That's true.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, when you were saying the first things that were coming to mind for me were prolonged grief disorder, right?
Mhm.
This idea that the clinician gets to decide when you're grieving too much, especially given the cultural context of the ways different societies grieve, right? Like, who am I as this clinician to come in and be like, bump, bump, problem?
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
like,
Bump
hey,
up.
If it gets you services and the insurance pays for me to sit with you for an hour, fuck it. I don't care. I'll put it down
Mm,
there, right? And maybe that's
mhm, mhm.
better than if I can't use adjustment disorder. Maybe that's better than depression. I don't know, which has maybe
Mm,
more weight to it for someone if something's wrong with me, right? So I don't know. There's
mm,
ways around it,
right.
right? But like still just even that idea of boom, like this is you, you're the problem. And we do that in so many ways as clinicians, right? Whether we say, oh, like that's
Mm,
normal or that makes sense or that doesn't. Like it's everything's so deeply political in every
right.
word. And I was just thinking about what you were saying in terms of like the ego and wanting to respond. The amount of times I've sat in classes where as like a sex radical, just the things I've heard. I
Hmm.
particularly remember one person who was a more prominent psychologist within the field of relationships. And
Mm-hmm.
her whole paradigm she had been talking about, and it's like couples, couples, couples. And I was like, well, could we expand this to more other types of relationships, right?
Yeah,
Beyond
yeah.
couples. And her response was, well, maybe, but I've never seen it actually work. Every time it's always one person who wants it and the other person who doesn't. Now, this is a power dynamic. I'm sitting in a class with a
Mm.
clinical psychologist, one of the leaders
Yeah,
of this area of relationships, saying
that's
that to
right.
a room of people and saying it never works. And
Hmm.
I sat there
Hmm.
going, wow. And I did respond back to her of saying, actually
Good for
that's not
you.
what I've seen in the community. I've seen people
Good
who
for
want
you.
both of it and it's my lived experience with that. And so it kind of
Mm,
stopped the conversation, but that was like a power differential moment and moving through
mm,
all these different moments in the field of psychology with sex.
yeah,
It's so complicated.
yeah.
I've been told I'm a bad girl many a times. And when I think
Mm,
of
mm.
Betty Dotson, she was running masturbation circles in the 90s with women where they would sit around and actually look at their vulvas in a mirror and have that collective group experience. We can even get
I've
into
heard about this. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
we can even
Hmm.
get into the powers of group psychology compared to individual psychology, right? But like for
Hmm.
just keeping us here for now, right?
Hmm.
That sort of circle of that empowerment. My God, if I
Hmm.
said I wanted to do that, do you know who would look at me as a clinical? That girl is nuts, right? Nuts.
Hmm.
But the amount of
Hmm.
healing that comes for people in that. And
That's
so
right.
there have been
That's
so
right.
many times where I'm moving through this world of if I were to say something like that in a class, I would
Yeah.
get a reaction. Even when I was in my damn class and there was an example of a couple, and I said, being where I'm at sauna with psychedelic work, I was like, oh, I'd love to have this couple try MDMA therapy and be able to connect and have it. The whole class
Hmm.
went silent. I felt this energy in the room of just, and my professor was like, well, not till the research is there. And it's like, fuck, the research was there in the 60s, my friend. Oh,
Dumb
but like,
dummy. This guy don't
exactly.
know shit.
I know, but that's the
Yeah.
power differential of I'm sitting down and he's standing up, right? And so
Hmm.
I just at that
Hmm.
moment have to take that deep breath of like, okay, I'm just gonna let it go, right? And or even
Hmm.
on the smaller scale, like my mom, like,
Hmm.
she's not college educated. Of course I love her, but
Hmm.
I tell her about my world of non-monogamy, and then she gets into this
Hmm.
activated state and looks at me and says, your relationships are so messed up that you need more than one. And I was just like,
Whoa. Fear.
oh, and I was just thinking, I was like, okay, in my head, I'm going, well, you have more than one relationship, but like you don't have sex with all of them. But like, I'm not going to
Real.
start explaining the ABCs of this. And I just have to let go and be
Hmm.
like, you are on a different journey. And there are not
Real.
enough words that I could express to even like pull you into this. And
Real.
so that act right there of making that self determination, self protection of my time and energy is limited and I
That's
can't
right.
go there.
That's right. And you embody certain convictions that you are not changing. And there's so much power in like we talk about like nature, right? A pine tree being a pine tree. It ain't making anything else but pine cones. It doesn't give
Yeah.
a shit. It is what it is. And it's not gonna try to convince an oak to not be an oak. Like, all right,
Right.
bro. Like that's you. That's you, bro. And
Yeah.
I'm glad that you can, I'm really glad because I think so many people get into situations where there's a power dynamic and then they begin to give up their pine treeness for
Yeah.
oakness. And but that wouldn't work. You would limit your power as a helper, as a healer, if you don't completely go in your direction and put your roots down completely in your conviction.
Right.
Let that shit grow. Because there's a I'm former ball player, right? There's a scoreboard everywhere, anywhere. And the scoreboard here is are you helping your people? You
Mm,
know? So at
yeah.
that point, like I'm excited to see what you do in the future because you can see that differential and that's what happens. But silence, this is one of my favorite things. Well, it feels like crap,
Yeah.
but people will not relent on their opinions, especially if fear is there. And that's really, in my view, or in my experience at least, that's what that block is. It's just that ego's like, we're not
Hmm.
going to admit that, oh, well, you know, maybe I'm wrong. It said no
Right.
motherfucker ever. It said nobody
Right.
ever in the history of ever. And like in that, man, what a shot to the ego. But then also there's this lack of intellectual discourse, which would actually lead to a lot of interesting directions, whether people agree with you or not. You can deepen the
Yeah.
experience of humanity, but
Hmm.
I don't know. I think there's also this very Ron Swanson-esque possibility in America where everyone can just mind their fucking business. And if we could do that, I just start to, I feel like we'd all be a lot happier because we'd solve our own problems deep in our own roots. Then that would lead to more of the, Venn diagram
Sure.
relationships, and we can share, and then we can on the other side share other things as well. And I don't know,
Right.
man, we're also such a young country, and I
Oh,
feel like
yeah.
we're in
Yeah.
our infancy and we don't really know
Totally.
to the freedom to meddle in other people's ideologies and different things, and
Right.
it's
Right.
wild. And not even discourse. Oh, that pisses me off about your professor. Just have a
Oh, I know,
conversation,
right?
bro. What research? Like that hasn't
Right.
been supported. Do you know the research? But if you said that, then you get a whole bunch of trouble. Like just come on, man.
Right.
Like are we in grad school? Are we thinkers or not?
Totally.
Like
Oh,
what are we
yeah.
gonna do?
So then
Yeah.
I really hit it when I was in psychopharmacology, and my professor was saying that ketamine can lead people into psychosis. And then I asked my supervisor, what's the research on this? And he's like, no, there's research saying that doesn't happen. And then I literally was just sitting in between two doctors going, who do I listen to? Oh no, just really hitting that, like, oh God, it's all biased, it's all perspective.
Real.
What research are you reading? Who wrote it? Like,
That's right.
it's just so
Define
much.
psychosis.
Totally. Well,
You
and
know?
then I have fun
Mm,
conversations when you look
mm.
at the inner rater reliability for depression and generalized anxiety disorder for the DSM-5 being as
Ah,
likely
ha, ha,
as
ha.
chance. And those are two of our most favorite like diagnoses, and it's as likely as chance. So you're telling me all of the research that we built on this is on a variable that is as likely as chance? Oh
Yes.
my God.
Yes.
Like the whole
Yes.
the all of the
Yes.
cards crumble, and I'm like, what do we know?
Big time.
Oh
Big time.
no.
And this oh man. And it does. And there's
Yeah.
this my teacher's teacher, who's Tibetan, who taught Pema Chodron, was telling this story about almost like a grad, it should be a grad school sort of story. But the student is asking the teacher, how do I dissolve experience? Right?
Mm.
AKA, how do I avoid my emotions? You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
Bro, these emotions are tough. How do I, self-lobotomize? How do I
Sure.
dissolve all this?
Sure.
Right. And the teacher goes, you don't dissolve experience, you penetrate it. Okay, you penetrate. Yes. And this is what's known as transmutation, sublimation, tantra, known in Buddhism. And I think this is very interesting. Freud does the same thing as many people do when they hear tantra. They
Mm.
think sex, but
Yeah.
really even like libido, sex,
Yeah.
we're talking about energy,
Right.
energy, and behavior CBT, no energy, so it's all,
Right.
you know what I mean? So,
Totally.
what do we do with this energy? And when we allow ourselves to, oh no, like just get really, really fucking real. When I allow myself to be
Hmm.
completely sad about the
Yeah.
state of humanity, about the state of a patient, to be completely scared shitless, when I allow those energies to vibrate through me,
Hmm.
it becomes a superpower.
Mm.
Sadness, quite literally, it is my superpower. it rage, wrath, it activates me. I think maybe being an athlete helped, but and using like basketball metaphors here,
Yeah.
when you're down 20, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is where I see humanity. We're down
Yeah.
20, but it's only the second quarter. It's early. We still have
Sure.
time, right? We're down 20. We're getting our asses kicked. The best thing to do when you're down 20 and you're getting ass kicked is just to try to locate the hoop and launch your body straight at it and try to dunk on somebody.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you do. How
Mm-hmm.
do you change the energy of the situation?
Yeah.
You feel how shitty it feels to feel that situation, and even well, this is maybe a bit controversial. I think especially in the Brene Brown era
Mm.
of shame is bad. But a little bit of shame, if you can really experience it directly, it may activate you to say, okay, well, what am I ashamed about? And what am I going to take action? How
Mm-hmm.
am I going to use that aggression towards myself and redirect it and impose my will onto my space? Whether
Yeah.
that's going to bed earlier, listening to different content, which helps me,
Right.
going back and listening to the rest of the Modern Anarchy
Yeah.
podcast listeners, so I can, get put on with different ideas and different things.
Mm-hmm.
How can I interact with my energetic situation, right? But you can't really get that unless you penetrate your own energy,
Yeah.
whether it be fear, fear,
Yeah.
anxiety, sadness. We're just pathologizing energy that
Right.
you can't destroy energy. Now we're violating laws of thermodynamics. These aren't theories. These are laws. You can't get
Yeah.
away from that, which is just so ironic to me, because even when white guys said it, Einstein, Nikola Tesla,
Sure.
it's all energy. We're still like, no, it just the field of psychology just thinks that emotions and thoughts aren't energy. Like, okay, like it's right
Mm-hmm.
there. Physics is right there.
Right.
So in
Right.
that way, I think the future of psychology will not use diagnostic categories because
I
you can't
hope.
categorize energy. Like, no, it's there are a couple of studies that came out too in the UK.
Mm.
It said
Interesting.
it said that diagnostic categories are inconsistent and have very little to do with the actual treatment, you know,
Mm.
because when you
Powerful.
just sit with someone and you allow them, when you just allow their humanity to be by sitting and doing nothing with them and
Mm-hmm.
just being with whatever it is at that time, even if you're being with their quote unquote resistance to themselves,
Totally.
and you just
Yeah.
sit with that. It just all like the pine tree, it rises
Mm-hmm.
to a peak, and
Yeah.
it's really that easy.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
simple is complicated. Everybody thinks things are more complicated when
Mm-hmm.
they themselves are complicated. They don't
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
what's there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's radical, right? When you think about the tabula rasa, blank slate sort of energy that Freud started with, which is funny because when we think about clowns, right, that
Mhm.
blank face is truly what terrifies us, to be very clear. And so it's just so funny, like relationally thinking about that. You're like, damn, Freud, you're off. Um, and so, like, when I stepped into feminist therapy, it was always this paradigm of you're supposed to be moved by the client, which
Mm,
opened me up into the space of, okay, I'm supposed to be moved, right? So, when my
mm,
client is crying, if it is moving me, to allow that, which I remember talking about in my
mm,
classes, and people thought that was radical. And I think obviously it's a nuanced
mm,
conversation of you don't want to be crying so much that your client is then caretaking for you, right? I'm trying to ground and be in my
mm,
body with that too, but it's not this blank slate. And we all need that in our lives. Again,
mm,
outside of the therapy room, is to have someone who listens.
mm,
And I can hear my existential mentor in my head when we say, "Oh, I'm just listening." No, you're listening. And the
mm.
power of that listening. He was first a chaplain for many years before he came into clinical psychology. And so I think
There you
had a
go.
very different perspective to what it means to just be, say, there it is again, just, right? No, to
Mm,
be with someone, to
mm,
be with. I hear you. I'm with you in this
mm,
space. I don't have to fix it. I'm
mm,
hearing you. I'm hearing your
mm,
pain. I'm feeling your pain. Mm.
mm,
And the
mm,
power of that resonance right there to know if we're thinking
mm,
about
mm,
existential isolation, just to be with
mm,
someone in that,
mm,
it's really powerful. And I guess when I talk about things like this too, I know there are a lot of therapists that follow the podcast, but there are a lot of people that aren't therapists. And just, I hope that, in all of our relationships, what does it mean to be with someone in that state rather than having to, oh, how can I help? How can I do this? How can I do that? Right? The capitalism of we need to get out of this because prolonged grief doesn't work under the systems when you got to go to work on Monday. Let's go, 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 go. No,
Mm, mm, mm,
I'm with you.
mm,
Mm,
mm.
mm. And the power of that, the
That's
intimacy
right.
of that.
That's right. And the blocking of for a person who may be blocking their own energy,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
block your energy, it redirects, right, into this space as what is an emotional contagion, they call it, right?
Mm,
Sitting across a sad person blocking it, you feel that
yeah.
sadness if you're allowing their vibration to penetrate you. And through that, this very interesting thing seems to happen when we allow a vibration and are then moved by it. That moving then emits a vibration that is acceptance and love and forgiveness
Mhm.
and all of, really any shit you can learn from sitting under a tree. And then through that vibration, right? That's
Mhm.
what that's what has the power
Yeah.
to dissolve energy,
Right.
dissolve shame, dissolve that which is not true, you know. And
Mhm.
but for us as any helper, if you are resisting your energy, you're projecting it onto your client through the air, through physics. You can't destroy your own energy. You're projecting it onto your work, onto to everybody. It's quite sad,
Mhm.
which just moved me to work harder, which is the
Sure.
entire point here, but the resonance. And I think this is also where, this will open up a whole good can of worms, a can of peaches.
Yeah. Excited.
Um, I think that's where a lot of folks really don't have the capacity to connect. And I think this is where monogamy actually comes from.
Mm,
Is this
sure.
idea that if I'm resonating with someone else, I'm cheating.
Right.
That's emotional cheating. What
Right.
what are you what are
Oh,
you
it's
talking about?
fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when you say, I love my client,
Right.
and you're like,
Totally.
oh, they jump to
Totally.
sex, they jump to marriage, they jump to,
Totally.
crossing
Yeah.
ethical.
Right.
Yeah.
That's how the spirituality gets kind of removed out of the picture. There's so many,
Mhm.
practices that incorporate love of strangers, right? Let alone this
Yes.
person that, yeah, is pouring their life before me and I'm sitting in intimacy. But yeah,
Yes.
dare I say I love that person? That
Yes.
means blah, 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 right? Which is, I hear how you're saying the connection to monogamy because it's the relationship escalator, the sort of
Mhm.
assumptions that what love means can only be in that frame. So anything, right? Like it's just it's
Real,
mind-boggling to me.
real.
Um and yeah, just yeah, there's so much up in that. I'm thinking about capitalism and just like the property and the passing down of
Mhm.
the control of the ownership and like how deep that is
Mhm.
interrelating into our psyches. It's we talk about like internalized homophobia, internalized racism, all these other things, but like there's so much more
Mhm.
and how that affects love. I am like signaling again. I keep
Yes.
doing this of like shoveling of like, whoa,
Yes.
whoa, whoa. That goes so much deeper, which I think always that makes me ask really deep questions about free will and the complexities of that one. Cause I think
Mhm.
just even
Mhm.
pinning back to my own journey when I grew up very Christian, I was condemning homosexuals
Mhm.
outright. I was like, which is fascinating. Why was that such a hot topic for me? I wonder, right? But like I was out there going, they're going to hell. This is not okay. This is not okay, right? And so when I look back on that, you know, version of myself, like was I really free,
Mhm.
right? Knowing that inside I was actually someone who had this capacity for love for multiple people, but was so indoctrinated within the systems that I was actively in conflict about it, so much so that I projected it out onto other
Mhm.
people, which I think
Mhm.
that's been one of the biggest things too, is like when I'm upset about something, what is it activating within me and my value system, right? We're talking back to that world of letting people do their stuff. Well, it's so hard because when you're doing that, when you have two partners,
Mhm.
it makes me feel frustrated about the fact that I only have one and I've never thought about that sort of freedom. So you can't have that. It's like, whoa,
Mhm.
whoa, my friend, So I don't know.
Hmm.
I do ask, as a liberation psychologist, right? I do ask deeper
Hmm.
questions about what free will looks like in a paradigm when we're taught so many
Yes.
narratives
Yes.
that I think are actively harming us, like an abusive relationship that we don't, Stockholm
Yes.
syndrome, like it just,
Yes. Yes. There are many ideas about this, but I'm making this paradigm up on the spot.
yeah.
There are only two forms of entrapment. Okay. The first we can escape, the second we cannot.
Mm,
So the first is what your conditioning, right? Your cultural conditioning. When I say cultural, I don't, I mean really everything, whether your country or your family had a certain style or
right.
being right outside New York or being an athlete,
Right.
right? So you have your cultural imprinting, which you are taking to be true. You're taking that to be solid and true, and you don't have a choice, to not act out, homophobia and things like
Hmm.
that, right? So that you can escape through attending each and every moment to the way the moment is. Hardware issue. So meditation, aka the capacity to focus on the moment, no matter what your mind is saying. It's almost like a windy kite is flying around. But the more that you hold your attention in the moment all the time, that's real meditation is all the time. It doesn't
Yeah.
stop when you get up off the seat. When you focus all the time, you can see the difference between the moment and what your mind and emotions are saying, your lower brain, quote unquote.
Sure.
Right. So that when you train that, you then become energy literate. So energy tells you what's what. You can actually experience your emotions just through that practice alone. So that's the first key.
Hmm.
Then the second key to that freedom on that first level is overwhelming the ego structure or the self resistance with nature's wisdom, which is really located within the insula. And that's overwhelming self love, overwhelming. So Matt will show that it creates this dynamic where the ego or the resistance is overwhelmed and overpowered
Mm,
by that sense of love.
yeah.
And that we don't really talk about the more, you know, we kind of talk moon, solar, receptive, active energies, so to speak. I don't like to say masculine, feminine. I just think
Right.
that's
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah.
Um, but the more solar aspect of love is hotter and more overwhelming. And when we engage ourselves like that, we learn that, oh, nature created this one on purpose,
Mm,
like this. And once you realize that you were born on purpose, once you realize that it cools the I have to impose my cultural imprinting and establish myself, or I'm a piece of shit. But once we cool that, we're operating from what really makes us human, which is logic. And love is logic. It is logical. It's a lot, and any resistance to that is just stuck energy.
mm,
So that's the first piece of free will where we can escape. The second, we cannot.
mm,
The second is nature creates. So I'll just use this one, this body, me.
yeah.
I try to not use I, but this body
Yeah.
was born in a super northeast sort of space. Okay. Very much for folks who have seen Seinfeld, very much like George Costanza's parents. Very, flippant. Mother's half Italian,
Yeah.
dad's a hardened black guy. Like
Yeah.
it just
Yeah.
is what it is.
Yeah.
Fire, fire, rah, rah.
Yeah.
Athlete.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also growing up in a really what I call blue collar trauma, right? Your parents are keeping a roof over your head, but just you have to dissociate in so many different ways. So that
Sure.
means I have a lot of racing thoughts, a lot of
Yeah.
anxiety, a lot of sadness. But once I see the projections on that first level and then embrace all of the energy, now there is freedom to move with consciousness. But I can't be something that I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
I can't, if I'm a pine tree
Right.
and I'm trying to be an oak, okay, that's the first level. But if I'm a pine tree and that's what it is, I can only really bear these kinds of pines,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And that's where I think that second layer is that there is no free will once you are what you are born to be.
Mm.
And that is actually, it's quite easy. Once you are aware of what you are and you can plant yourself, especially in America, especially in America where we have I learned this through immigrants laughing in my face when I complained about different things in America. They're like, okay,
Yeah.
you have mobility, bro. Like you have the right to complain, you know,
Yeah, it's
and that
true.
and you know, so once I really recognize what it is that I am a tool, an instrument of Mother Nature herself, and tuning in with her through my heart,
Mm.
through overwhelming self-love that
Yeah.
allows this one to be the embodiment as intended.
Hmm.
So that's my at least the mechanics, quote unquote, of free will.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
At least my convictions.
Yeah, today. Yeah. Let's check
Ah,
in a couple of
exactly.
years, see where we're at. Yeah.
Right.
I'm thinking too just about wanting to validate the world of your basketball being your metaphor, right? It's for me
Mm,
it's climbing, right? It's these physical activities, these activities that stretch us and grow us in so many different ways, and some people might call
mm.
cheesy, but I call spiritual, right? I mean,
It is.
yeah,
It
yeah,
is. And
yeah.
the world is so it's so it's very easy to like have thoughts and opinions and ideas, especially in this age of information. You know, it's
Yeah,
very, very difficult to contextualize things. So metaphor I find really helpful, especially
powerful.
metaphors within nature, you
Yeah,
know.
exactly. And there's a whole story to that game when you're down 20, right? There's a whole meaning making,
Mm,
there's a whole embodied experience of what it means to push through that parallels out to so many different areas of life. And yeah, for me, it's looking at that wall that has the roof where I'm going to be climbing upside down, going, I don't
mm,
know if I can do that. That looks really scary. And then I start to feel it in my chest, and then I go and I do it and I send it with no
mm,
takes, and I get to the top and I'm like,
mhm,
damn, I'm stronger than I thought, right? And that journey
mm.
is so much a metaphor for a lot of what I do and think about, how my mind works. And so when we're talking about free will, I do think about the discomfort of growth, of what it means to step up to that wall that I'm looking at, going, oh my God, I can feel my chest tightening and having this, but I know that, again, I'm not crying while going up the wall. Let's be very clear, right? We're not pushing past our
Yeah.
zone of tolerance, right? Of making me sob up the wall and panic and freak out. But there is a space of I am scared and I'm doing it anyways.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And this is interesting. You're not confusing pleasure for fulfillment.
Yeah.
It can be a part of it, and ultimately growing will lead to fulfillment,
Right.
contentment, peace. And that really changed things for me in my own life
Mm.
as well, because there was a time where I was just like pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. And sure, that can be a part of things,
Yeah.
but there is this slow grind,
Hmm.
of growing, especially in when we're serving people. It involves a level of real openness.
For sure.
Um,
Light in the dark, right? If you have a buffet table of all the finest foods and you gorge out, you get a stomach ache, right? Like, what does it
yes,
mean to balance pleasure with pain, right?
yes,
And feel
yes.
into that. I think that's the fullness of life and the softening of it all, right? Is when you're not in just one and you take the yes and.
Yes, and this is real. Oh man. Sometimes I feel we confuse freedom for a lack of consequences and then get
Mm,
confused and don't want to accept that there's a consequence. And then in modern society, we can actually avoid a lot of consequences depending on
sure.
where we're located in society.
Yeah, I mean, that reminds me of the existential frame, which sometimes I want maybe a more positive frame to it all too. And again, maybe a yes
Yeah.
and frame. But I think
Mhm.
about the framing of you're condemned to freedom, right? You
Yes.
have to make the choice. Not making the choice is a choice, and you're condemned to that freedom of choice making. And I don't like the word condemned, right? Because it seems like it's so sometimes often so negative. Like we're isolated in our existential experience. We're condemned, right? It's like in the isolation, there's also so much to play with. I get to choose in this moment what parts of you or what parts of myself you get to see. So, wow, I get to
Mm-hmm.
play with that isolation, or we're condemned to be
Mm-hmm.
free, and also the capacities of what we do in that. So, I want this yes and I think that's where I disagree with the framing of the Matrix. It's like so dark once you get out, right? I want a world where it's light and we have to unpack the systems at the same time. You
Ah,
know what I mean?
I do. Well, I can, well, this may trigger everybody,
Go
but
for it.
I'll give you something that may help
Yes.
the darkness. So this is actually in the Bhagavad Gita, which is, in my view, the most complete spiritual or energetic
Yeah.
explanation of reality. And for those who don't know who maybe don't know the story, Arjuna is this warrior, and he's about to fight everybody that is disagreeing with him, including like his family members and shit. And he's on the battlefield and he's crapping his pants. He's like, "Oh my God, I can't do this."
Yeah.
And then God, quote unquote, nature
Yeah.
personified in Krishna comes down, and basically this is like the black guy version of it. Hey, Arjuna, what the hell are you doing, bro? You're fucking embarrassing me, man.
Yeah.
Like, what is this? You're
Yeah.
losing your shit. I'm putting you in this situation to act out your role, and
Yeah.
what are you doing? And
Yeah.
they can I'm gonna die, all these different things. And Krishna goes, silly ass human, you're not gonna die, and here's why. Energy can't be created and it can't be destroyed. So in many, many, many ways, these bodies, this life is just shifting and changing form.
Mm.
So as we come down into this particular form, we get a character, we get it, this embodiment, and we are not the embodiment. We are the energy which animates.
Mm.
And the nature of, or the mechanics or the psychology of self-realization is realizing that you are that energy. You are formless energy inhabiting a more dense
Hmm.
energy body. And that's where it's play.
Yeah.
It is a play. And we're playing
Yeah.
our parts on the great stage, as it were. And
Sure.
at least for me, that's what made me not afraid of death, which made me
Yeah.
much more connected to this character and much more interested in how to make the juice really worth the squeeze,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I try to practice the Buddhist practice of meditating on death every morning and feeling that
You
finiteness of
do?
it. Yeah, every morning I try to, it's
Oh.
coming for me, like why run from what's coming from me? And in that,
Ah.
can I soak up, right? Yeah, in that, can I soak up what's here right now? And I think it's so fun to
Mm.
be in a world where what you just said is grounded in the best of our current understanding of science, right? This isn't even a mystical woo woo. We know energy cannot be created or destroyed. Those are the laws of thermodynamics. And we know that the atoms that make up our bodies are what get recycled into the earth and other ways. So it's not even woo woo. It's
No.
just facts at this point, right? And it's in a question of how do you frame all of it, which I think, yeah, it takes me back to when I asked you to introduce yourself, even that framing of the absolute and the relative, because I think sometimes in the spiritual space, there's so much of this, we are one, we are one, we are one, we are one. And I hear that. And then I'm also, but like you said, where's the relative of you grew up in your certain location and have your lived experience that is radically different than mine? And so can we hold the yes and of the absolute and the relative of our lived experience?
Real, real. Oh man. Holding those two, it's very interesting. It's almost like this to be nihilistic and individualistic and everybody sucks and that, and then like love and light and everything is one. There is so much danger in either approach to
Yeah.
ignore your cultural imprinting and pretend that it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Whether I'm a man pretending, oh, everything is one. Well, if you're not going to own your masculine imprinting, your manly imprinting, you're going to like hurt women. Do you want to
Right.
hurt women?
Right.
Like,
Right.
or the
Yeah.
opposite. It's just like, oh, it just creates such fear when we think we're going to die and we're convinced of that and living in that. It's just, no one can really, I don't know. You ever see an actor who's acting on stage and they were just super scared and uncertain of their
Mhm.
role. Like relaxed performers are
Yeah.
perform very,
Right.
very well.
Yeah.
It's oh man.
Mm.
Mhm.
Did you watch the, I mean, I'm sure you've
Mhm.
heard of the plane crash with the I think it was rugby players, the football in the Andes.
I heard about this. I did
Yeah, that
not watch it.
happened. Yeah, there's the recent Netflix remake Society of Snow, and there was
Yeah.
another remake that was a movie that was done on it in the past, and I'm sure you know the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess for a listener who doesn't, right, it's this plane crash of this team that was flying over the Andes that crashes there and then is left out in the snowy caps of mountains for 70 days, right? And so
Mm,
in 70 days you run out of food, right? And so then they ended
mm,
up eating their team members to survive, right? This is the realities of humanity.
mm.
Um, what a ethical conundrum of an experience,
Yeah.
right? But just thinking about nature and the wisdom of nature, right? Like
Mm,
nature is
mm,
scary. Nature has the capacity to put us in that damn situation. Right? Like
mhm.
all it's the
This is
yes and
real.
to all of that being a part of our
Mhm.
world of we can have
Mm,
this love and
mm,
lightness and also yeah, that right there
mhm,
and the lion that kills the gazelle, right? I mean, it's just such a yes and to the experience and it's
mm,
not all love and light, you know?
mm. Nature is very violent. Our situation is very, very violent. It's
Right.
especially in the Western world, I'm so fascinated. So fascinated. Some spiritual teacher who said he was talking to Westerners in maybe like the 50s or something.
Hmm.
And he's like, you all wanting the world to bend to your will is like a tiger sitting in the jungle saying, don't these humans just come into my lair and come and sit right in front of me? This is bullshit, you know? And it's these
Yeah.
harsh, real realities. I think a lot of it comes down to experiencing that fear and that harshness
Yeah.
and then deciding what we're gonna do with it. I
Hmm.
had to like institute a note for myself, at least a no complaining policy.
Mm,
And I found for myself that if I'm complaining, there's either something that I can do that I'm not doing, or something I need to let go that I'm
mm,
clinging to,
sure.
which is really a tricky thing to do, especially when there's so much pain or fear or confusion, and even
Mhm.
allowing myself to be confused and allowing that process. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Uh,
Ow.
yes, I don't know. Oh, okay. That was an easy band-aid to rip off.
Yeah.
Now I don't worry about it. Yeah.
Yeah. But sitting in that, oh,
Comes through the body. It's
yeah.
and there are different energies, at least with I'll go through all of them with Buddhism in particular,
Yeah.
and they talk about the energy of ignorance.
Mm,
And when ignorance is transmuted, it becomes all pervasive space and possibility. So
mm,
the not knowing, actually, when we acknowledge it and honor it, we don't like stumble around in the dark when we don't know, try to pretend we know what we know, right?
yeah.
That's the opposite side of things. We just allow that process, and then reality sort of comes to us at its own pace,
Mm,
really teaching us. And that's where paying attention will really, I think at least, do the work for us, but not at our own pace. And that's
sure.
a very interesting juxtaposition to this world. Know
Yeah.
everything right now.
What do you think that actually looks like, though? I think embodiment in felt sense rather than
Yeah.
cognitive, but I'm just kind of curious of trying to actually get in that space of presence, what that actually looks like.
Yeah. So what it looks like, to trip you out,
Yeah.
it feels like this,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
It feels like this. That which is being said, right, is only what can be put into words.
That's the wisdom right there. And then if I ask again, I feel like I'd heard metaphors where it's like, how long will it take for me to be enlightened, right? And you ask once, and then you ask twice. It's like now 10 years. Ask, but what does it mean? 100 years before you're enlightened, right? Like the simplicity of your answer right there being the whole answer in and of itself.
Yes, that's it. We're right here, and really the essence is being comfortable enough to allow the full sensation of the body,
Yeah.
right? And there's a lot of, yogic science. There's different things. The essence is to not like pinch the pipe shut, aka the cerebral spinal cord. But then there is a mental holding or clinging. So there's
Yeah.
knots in the root, right? Not allowing ourselves there. There's a knot in the heart, not
Hmm.
allowing yourself to feel. And then there's a knot in the mind,
Yeah.
which doesn't allow us to just stop and just sit there. And there's a lot of awkwardness that folks don't want to sit with that block and
Yeah.
just sort of sit there and be with it,
Hmm.
and
Right.
it's here.
Right. And you're a liberation psychologist, so you know when I say it's the systems, right? We in our modern day era are some sort of Buddha relative in terms of the way that he had enlightenment from being someone whose family had a ton of money that he was able to sit, and like here we are having this podcast on a Wednesday morning, having the space and time to talk about this while other people are working in a system that's actively grinding you so hard, right? Like, how are you even supposed to get to the space of feeling when you're being hit, right? So, being able to direct that arrow towards the systems, and it's just making me think about the power of psychedelics in our modern time to kind of really shake up that snow globe and bring people into deeper embodiment as such a tool for this. I was just thinking about too what you had said earlier about being moved with and after having this medicine experience where I had gone first and someone was holding me and then we flipped, right? So I had maybe more opening after mine of just tenderness and that sort of, we have that neuroplasticity going on, just that more sensitivity to the world after a psychedelic experience. And it was really interesting. I was holding her hand when she was going through hers. And our goal was to meditate on if we could feel one another without words, of course, but feeling one another.
Mm,
And I
mm,
was just looking over at her and her lip was quivering and she was getting sad. And I was trying to feel in, what does it mean
mm,
to meditate on her experience? What does it mean to meditate? And my mind was completely blank as I was watching her. I couldn't connect to anything. And then a tear dropped down my eyes and another tear. And it was
mm,
a really radical experience just to not be thinking, feeling anything,
mm,
but to be crying as I was
mm,
trying to meditate with her and feel with her. And I don't know. I do think in a world of our systems, I'll be curious. I know it's not the answer. And I've talked about this again on the podcast again and again and again, and how it's not the answer because the answer is community. But in a world of the power of psychedelics to open us up to more feeling and sensation, I'm really interested to see how it
mm.
helps us.
That's right. It smooths out thermodynamics. And many folks, the system of the body, and this is what yoga intends to do, is bring about energetic union through the body.
Hmm.
'Cause the body is very much a tuning fork.
Right.
So, uh-huh,
Yeah.
this the body is the fire, or excuse me, the piece of wood. Meditation is the stick, and Om is the sharpening. You know?
Hmm.
And when with any activity that allow helps us tune into awareness of energy. Sometimes psychedelics is like the jet fuel of that, but
Right.
even sometimes for folks, it's just learning what energy am I consuming at any position in society that is dampening my awareness of what I am. Nature can only get on your side if you tune into nature and what that may mean. And I think that is really what I at least try to help folks understand, regardless of their position in society. You can be aware of energy, you can metabolize pain. Nothing is stronger than your awareness, no experience. And that energy is really, really powerful. Big follower of Malcolm X as well. And I think he's the perfect example of that. He just opened up to his energy and then, like, boom, power.
Mm.
That is something that many folks they learn by accident. I think it's the old some Buddhists or some teachers said enlightenment is an accident, and the practice of awareness makes us accident prone.
Mm.
And that's it's really where I I feel very, very frankly hopeful. And I think maybe this is a switch up.
You're the
Everyone's like, this
pessimist.
is it's all Once I am nature, if human beings cease to exist, I will still be here.
Yeah.
And that is the ultimate letting go process, which also
Right.
activates us to being exactly what we are at all times
Yeah.
without dampening performance. If someone is a high performer and they embody that, then okay. If they're not, they're not. You know, there's no coming, there's no going.
Right.
Mhm.
Yes, which gives me peace and tranquility and that letting go. And there's a lot of work for us to do in this space. You know, you're a psychologist in training over here to be. And when I think about my clients who are working with the activation in their body and that energy, and the first time that they go to their general practitioner for support for a checkup and they ask about their mental health and they share that, the general practitioner goes, here's Prozac, here, take this. And again, I'm not completely against all medications as powerful tools of nature to help us. And
Yeah.
as someone who's been on an SSRI and that journey of getting off of them, of what that was
Mm,
like, woo,
likewise. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
that then you maybe understand that journey of every time afterwards, am I going to fall apart? Do I need that drug? Oh my God, right? So my heart goes out
Mm,
to all of my clients and people that go through that journey. But part of that, again, liberation psychology is the power dynamics of when they step into the room and the doctor says here. And
yeah.
then the doctors over here might say, hey, there's research showing that meditation is as effective
Hmm.
as SSRIs, right? Even exercising the body can be so effective for that. But just our society's power dynamics of what is healing. I mean, and again, the way SSRIs work is by dampening the experience of your stimulus so that way you can process more, right? Again, helpful
Hmm.
too for some, but the reality is it's dampening your experience rather than kind
That's
of
right.
what we were speaking about earlier of how do I feel more? How do I actually have
Yeah.
more energy in my life, right? And
Maybe it needs to be sharp.
right.
Mm,
Because maybe my fire and that fury that responds to that professor is actually valid, right?
it
Rawr,
is.
rawr. Like I don't want to dampen that.
It is. It really is. And I think there are great examples of this in fantasy and whether we're talking Star Wars, recent Star Wars with Rey. Very,
Mm-hmm.
very this is all
Haven't seen it.
about, oh my God, it's all about transmutation
Really?
and fearing energy. And what happens when we stop fearing what will happen with our shadow self
Sure.
and we actually metabolize it and then direct it with consciousness. In many ways, well, I don't know. I think Game of Thrones goes a little too far before they
Mm-hmm.
get to the revenge porn towards the
Mm-hmm.
end.
Sure.
Um, but same sort of dynamic. What happens when Jon Snow blocks his energy, his sense of wrath, right? Because he's not supposed to. And what happens with Daenerys is getting overwhelmed by an experience, right? It's very human, right?
Sure.
This like all of these examples of humanity I find very clear when just like you were talking about the rugby team as well. Like how do
Right.
we really metabolize and let the moment tell us what to do, regardless of how primal, quote unquote, the experience really is.
Mm-hmm. Well, then take this can of peaches. That could be another podcast, right? Of
Mm,
kink and shadow
yeah.
and playing, right? And again,
Yes.
just like
Yes.
psychedelics, there's a world of healing in psychedelics and a world of spiritual bypass and and in kink there's a world of healing and play with the shadow and a
Mhm.
world of complex chaotic relationship to that too, right? The yes and to
Yes.
all of it, because that's also really there as
Ooh, that's
well.
really good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like just like substances, right? Chaotic relationship to substance, chaotic relationship to kink, right? It's all possible. Healing is
Mhm.
there on both sides. But that's 100% what I think about of like playing with the shadow sides in consensual dynamics so that we can dismantle rape culture at the end of the day, because
That's
that
beautiful.
being a restriction of this energy that we all have. We have that snow up in the Andes, and where do we get to play with that energy in all
Yeah.
of us, right?
This is real. Where do we get to play with it? And where do we get to heal through it, create a relationship with it?
Right.
I said it to my, oh man, I'll be wilding up in there. But I said to my eating disorder group in partial hospitalization, we were talking about shadow work, and
Yeah.
I talked about wrath
Yeah.
in my own experience. And once I locate your confusion or ignorance, I unleash wrath upon it, you know. And this is its power. And when we create a real relationship with power in any sense and powerlessness,
Right.
we can then really navigate the range of human experiences and really allow moments to happen. You can't be if you're resisting any part of this hardware, these bodies, and that creates that friction in the machine, the
Yeah.
blocking of the flow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mm. I'm holding myself back knowing that if I throw more cans out, we'll keep talking for hours.
Well, you could,
Yeah.
just for kicks. Yeah, yeah.
Which is beautiful, right? The resonance that I feel with some people in this space. And I'm sure I've had listeners comment of feeling that at times where I really like jive with some people and don't, and like vibrations, all the things we've talked about. So it's been such a joy to bounce off of you and co-collaborate to make something so special today. And I do have two questions I want to ask you as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. My first question is, if you were to take a moment and pin back to an earlier version of yourself
Mhm.
and call that into mind, I'm curious what you would want to say to him, and if you
Mhm.
could locate just a little bit of who that person is.
Mhm. There was a time where I was going through a really dark breakup.
Mm,
And I remember a moment where I was sitting on the floor, really deep in it and resisting the experience in a lot
yeah.
of ways, really bewildered and not understanding. And I would tell him to allow, to allow. The reason being when you allow, this is going by everything we've talked about, when you allow, it just speeds up
Mm,
your awareness and your ability to metabolize energy. And I like when we don't do that, we can cause a lot of suffering to
right.
ourselves, whether it's struggling with substance abuse in my 20s, or not clearing out different pieces of self-image and resisting energy, and then you end up attracting other folks with intimacy stuckness.
Yeah.
So it would be allow.
Yeah, it reminds me of the metaphor of we use it often in psychedelic work to just prep for the pain of what might come up in that space, right? The jet fuel of what
Mhm.
that might take someone to, of when you have a splinter, it actually hurts to pull it out. So we kind of like push it back in, push it back in. Nah, I don't, push it, push it, push it back in, versus the, okay, we're actually gonna, you know?
That's a great metaphor. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I hear
Mhm.
you. I hear you. And of
Mhm.
embracing that pain of pulling out the splinter.
That's right. That's right. It can only heal when we do that.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
And my final question, usually before I do that, I create some space for the guest if they want to say anything else to the listener. So maybe it would be a great time if you want to take us through a meditation and what you are thinking about there. I'd love to explore.
Yes, let's do it. So what this is a hack, so to speak. So we're hacking the brain. It's really built off of very advanced Buddhist techniques. So once someone moves through the path of self-clarity, which is just attention, mindfulness, awareness of our own conditioning,
Hmm.
then we move into helping and being like, oh my God, there's so much suffering. How do we help others? Then we need, through that process, we start to realize, oh my God, I have a savior complex.
Yeah.
I actually, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
classic, especially for mental health professionals. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Like this is
Yeah.
totally
Yeah.
about my own ego.
Right.
There's a there's a level of residue of ego, especially when we start to pierce through and have those heart-opening experiences, very sober when the mind starts to settle into the body and it just quiets.
Mm,
You start to feel that love. That's where a lot of folks get caught in the bliss stage or the love and light stage and never move further.
sure.
And I'm talking about the process of self-realization, tuning into Mother Nature's instincts actually. So we have to train the mind to see itself as actually enlightened. When we don't train the mind, it's sort of this like, not me, I can't, it's impossible. It's an idea, it's a mental barrier. And once we have enough sensitivity, we no longer risk narcissism. And I think people who really love, they like, oh, they want to like be humble, but that actually makes it very hard to become powerful as pine trees or whatever kind of
Sure.
tree that you are. So this process is a visualization technique, which I've secularized it
Sure.
because I call it the compassion avatar technique.
Mm, mm-hmm.
And the first goal is the visualization, which we'll do. And the second goal is to visualize it once a week and then continuously reference it in our self-talk.
Sure.
So what this starts to do is it starts to hold the mind to a certain standard. If there's any way to actually train and change the
Yeah.
personality structure. So I'm not talking neuroplasticity, I'm talking like the actual mind. It's this process. It's almost my teacher's teacher's teacher
Mm-hmm.
would call it giving ourselves a transplant,
Mm-hmm.
giving our heart a transplant.
Yeah. Love it.
Um, so this process is to bring about the energy, and then we can reinforce that energy.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go into the practice here. So the first thing we're gonna do is close the eyes and hear the body position most ideal. Okay. If we want to be snobs about it, we can sit straight up, shoulders back. And what this does is it allows the spinal cord the freedom. This is the channel of cerebral spinal fluid or the carrier of chi, so to speak. Just like a tree planting down roots, this central channel carries out nerve endings into the body. And the more we relax this central channel, the more our nerves can extend into the body. Okay, so sitting straight up and down, or if it's more comfortable, you can lay down. That's okay too. And all we're going to do once we have our position is begin to take very deep and full in breaths and very deep, full out breaths. And all we're trying to do is move the breath in and out, almost like inflating balloons and then deflating them all the way. And what this is doing is it's turning down the volume of cortisol, stress hormone. So this is the first cheat code, so to speak, of relaxation, just breathing all the way in, all the way out. And for a bit of extra relaxation, you can begin to relax the body on the out breath. It's very hard for any machine to circulate energy if there's any squeezing. So as you're breathing out, relax the shoulders, the neck, the jaw, and each out breath, just notice where there's holding. So on one level, it may be the shoulders, and then you'll notice a few breaths later that you're holding the lower abdomen, which can be a bit of a sneaky place where we really don't think about, right below that belly button. See if we can Relax that a little bit. Any squeezing there, just little by little, relax. And as far as the neuroscience of this is top down relaxation. We are using the front of our brain to downwardly from the top relax the squeezing and holding of the body. Now, at this point, you can let the breath resume a natural rhythm, so no more deep breaths. And I want you to bring to mind a person or a deity, a spiritual deity, a pet. This person can be alive, not. It could be someone who you met in a checkout line at a store, but someone who is completely compassionate, someone who loves you unconditionally. It's the most loving person or being or pet that you can think of. If you're having a really hard time, you can use me. So once you have this being in mind, I want you to imagine sitting across from this being. The more detail, the better. I want you to imagine what it looks like when this being is loving you. Just really imagine their face, their body language, their presence. The more detail, the better. Is it a smile? Are you holding their hand? Are you hugging them? What does this experience of being loved conjure up in your energy field? Really see if you can allow that energy to rise in this moment. Notice where in the body you are sensing and feeling this. You can even bring your hand to heart center to really engage this very powerful energy. Really breathe in, allow this. Really feel its capacity to overflow you. And then in this moment, I want you to bring to mind something you don't like about yourself. This doesn't have to be anything too dark, too traumatic, anything like that. Just play with this at your comfort level. Something that you judge yourself for. This could be a personality characteristic. This could be a mistake that you made. Some sense of lack or even fear. I want you to imagine what this being would say or do to comfort you in this experience, this feeling of lack, judgment, self-rejection. Really get as vivid as you would like. They say something to you, would they hold your hand, rub your back, give you a hug? I want you to really allow them to love you and love this thing you are rejecting. Love this thing that you are not allowing light to shine on. Really open here, open. Allow that love, allow yourself to experience this care. Really breathe in the energy. Allow this light to really fill you up. Noticing any emotions, any thoughts, any sensations. Allowing that to really flow into and through your system. You're just really bathing in it for a bit. Remembering to re-visualize this being saying compassionate things, imagining them holding you, being with you with a loving gaze, loving words. And lastly, I want you to, at your comfort level, offer your own words of kindness, of love to yourself, and see if you can borrow some of the words, some of the love that you are being shown by this being. This could be words, could be a self hug. Sometimes I'll caress my face. Really try to allow you to love yourself just in this moment. Really try to breathe in your own self affection. Noticing any energy shifts, any sensation. Really taking a few slower breaths here. Really grounding into our bodies, grounding into this experience. And very slowly beginning to maybe move the feet a little bit. Flexing the calves, feeling your hands. And then when we're ready, we can start to open the eyes, come back to the space.
That was beautiful.
Mm.
Very powerful.
Mm.
I feel a little high, which is nice.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah.
It's true. The love drug.
Uh-huh.
Ooh,
Yeah.
it's very interesting. The insula perspective takes. When you take the perspective of someone who loves you onto yourself, it's a hack. It then allows real embodied self-love, but
Mm-hmm.
this sort of borrowing compassion from another who
Mm-hmm.
is just, at least to ourselves, more powerful in their capacity to love us.
Right. Right.
You know, we
Yeah.
need that. That's the guru model in
Sure.
many other cultures, but that naturally always doesn't work. There can be resistance, there can be non-secular issues, you know. So the beauty of this, for some folks, they'll choose to use their pet or a loved one or a parent, grandparent, whoever. One guy used Malcolm X.
Sure. Yeah.
And then, I'm out in Kentucky. A lot of people will just use Jesus and like that's that, and that works for them,
Sure.
right? Using
Yep.
Jesus without Christianity,
Right.
which can be a powerful experience for some, even folks who maybe have resistance to that structure, but know that, hold on a second, Jesus was a hippie, bro. I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure. I'm pretty sure he didn't hate on gay people. I'm pretty
No.
sure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
creating that self-relationship through
Right.
visualization to engage energy,
Powerful.
and then the energy does the work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really beautiful to sit with that and the embodied nature of it, really connecting to that felt sense. And yeah,
Mhm.
definitely for me, I was just thinking as I was going through it, just this, oh, what a pain point that that loving
Mm,
person isn't
mm,
my family. Like, oh,
mm,
right? Which is great that
mm.
we have pets and other people to expand out to, but just thinking about,
Yeah.
everything we know about relationships and your sense of self, that when you've had those experiences with the people that are supposed to potentially be that in your life, oof.
Yes.
Oof.
Yes, you know, it's very painful and very interesting. And for myself, I really identify with
Yeah.
that notion and how I didn't really learn myself to experience love until I started to meditate on deities. And that's how I
Sure.
really came into contact with the real speed of that vibration. I almost said purity, but that's not it. It's faster. It's a less dense, faster vibration. And when the body is safe, and I'm exposing my hacks here, we slow down the body all the way from top down, and then we relax the body, and then we engage the mind
Mm.
in a vibratory sort of state that functions to dissolve that. It's very hard to want people in our lives who are just naturally in a space of, denser vibrations to be in that higher, faster sort of space. It's always very interesting
Yeah.
how quickly this particular method just pops us right into that state or space. The real challenge is, can you vibrate like that when you're around your parents anyway?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you see? This is the next stage of the practice is seeing and treating everyone as the person or deity of your choosing.
Right.
Ram Dass used this as well. He did not like
Sure.
his homework from his guru. Be nice to that hardcore Republican who you hate. But you
Right.
had to put him on the altar next to his guru, and he'd be
Right. Exactly. Right. Well, because that person is also my past self and my family. And then, yeah. And
like,
so then it does remind me of the yoga teacher training when we would do the meditations of loving kindness, where you start with yourself and then someone that you have negative energy towards, and trying to
yeah,
actually sit there of what does it mean to extend love towards that person and then the whole world, and
yeah.
sitting in that sort of vibration and meditation and the power of that. And I believe in the ripples. I believe in the ripples of this conversation and the ripples of your meditation,
Mm.
and how that will ripple out to more love, maybe be not maybe, but certainly beyond our generation.
Oh yeah, it will because it's just true,
Yeah.
you know. It's
Yeah.
it will, and
Mhm.
very interesting. I think especially for helpers, and for anyone listening who's wanting to engage that sense, those who they serve. Sometimes I'll meditate on suffering beings
Sure.
straight up, completely, especially with clients who may be struggling or different things. And man, it's a powerful experience to directly experience that pain of another, that wish. I think it's Pema Chodron, the teacher's teacher, who said to meditate on the desire for the alleviation of suffering, not the
Mm.
actual. the desire,
Mm,
the only desire worth having.
sure.
Mm.
Mm. You've left us with so many good things to reflect on and listen back to again and again. So I'm really, really thankful for you today.
I'm thankful for you and
Yeah.
all of your work. Seriously.
Yeah. Cool.
Seriously. Thank you for your work. And I'm really excited to see where you go
Mm.
in your work.
Me too, man. I
And
don't know what's gonna happen. I'm following the winds of, all of it. So it's gonna take me places. So I
oh
appreciate the
yeah.
learning that I've gotten from you. And when I'll go back to edit this in a couple of months, I will sit and simmer in it again. And yeah, it's a good life. So I'm very, very thankful.
It is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If it feels good to you, I can guide us towards our closing question.
Deal.
Let's do it. So, the one question that I ask everyone on the podcast is, what is one thing that you wish other people knew was more normal?
Wanting to feel powerful,
Mm.
wanting to be powerful.
Hmm.
When we reject that desire for power, then it controls us.
Right.
And I think that is the most dangerous thing for anyone to do is reject that instinct. It doesn't allow us to build a society in an authentic sort of space. And it also has the most capacity to hurt people, ourselves. It disempowers us
Right.
or it controls us from behind the scenes. I don't want power. I don't want power. Like, okay, resisting that is going to manifest that. And,
Right.
you know, that
Exactly.
I'll leave it to you to figure out how that manifests in relationships
Oh, yeah.
and wanting wanting power
For
and control.
sure. For sure.
Mm.
I mean, I see a practice of so many cans of peaches, right? Again, kink, power, consensual awareness of that, right? And
Mm.
even just in my exploration of non-monogamy, to let go of attachment in an
Mm.
attached way in terms of attached relational theory. Like, I'm very connected to these people. This is not whatever, we fuck and we go away. No, like, I love these people, but how can
Mm.
I let go of attachment and my desire for power over dynamics, right? In terms of their
Mm.
self-governance to move through the world, and do I trust them enough to stay with me and or leave when it feels like that's what they need to do? And that letting go of attachment is
Mm.
whoa, 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 whoa,
Mm.
whoa, whoa, whoa. So yes,
Mm.
I'm
Mm.
simmering in that one every single day. So
Mm.
it's a joy.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's tricky.
Yep. Tune back in.
To suffer is to cling, but
Yeah.
to experience pain is to love.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. It was such a joy to have you today. Thank you for joining us.
Likewise, likewise. This
Mhm.
was awesome. Thank you for having this podcast in the first
Yes,
place.
of
Yeah,
course.
it's a blast.
Yes. Where do you want to plug for people who want to connect with you, your
Yeah.
teachings, and all of your offerings today?
Where to plug? Where to plug? Where to plug? Well, brodericksawyer.com is the easiest sort of catch-all space. Information, contacts, whether it's speaking consultation, in-depth therapist training, mental health service sort of training on how to really embody liberation psychology. You had a taste today, but there's a whole process of decolonization that we go through in the first even like couple hours of a training, and then going into the practical parts in the last 6 hours of a particular training.
Sure.
So there's really a lot more to the rabbit hole. But to connect, brodericksawyer.com, and you can connect with me on Instagram, Dr. Brod123. And then you can get access to all my stuff, whether it's meditation albums, live online retreats, which I'm just starting with, trying to make something low cost, really easy to get into contact with me, get more experience with meditation and random teachings. But yeah, that's where to
Mhm.
find me. LinkedIn too. I'm cool with LinkedIn. It's
Yeah.
becoming an interesting
Sure.
uh, matrix. I'm trying to turn it into a matrix, not matrix
I hear you.
sort of state. Coming like Neo, you know what I mean? All right, let me just see what I can do here. Yeah.
Totally, totally, totally. Well, it was such a joy to have you today, and so thank you for joining me.
I appreciate you. Thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed today's episode, then leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. And head on over to modernanarchypodcast.com to get resources and learn more about all the things we talked about on today's episode. I want to thank you for tuning in, and I will see you all next week.